Hey,
Hello, how are you?
I think that's all. So I have the first and the second point. So I'm working on a Rubocop rule to prevent calling any methods on active record base. I found a few cases when we cannot fix this yet because it needs a bit of research. So I thought that as per our guidelines, we introduce the rule first and ignore the offenses, and in a follow-up merge request, I will fix the offenses. Because yeah, my current merge request consists like 200 changes, so it's a bit difficult. I think having the rule merged first is probably better. At least the merge request will be smaller. Yeah, I don't know. If you are interested, take a look at the merge request. It's pretty simple. At least the rule itself is simple.
I'm wondering about that rule. Something I didn't quite understand was like we were changing all of the active record based dot connection for application record dot connection, but that's only part of what we need to do. Well, that's not actually going to remove the fact that we're referring to the wrong connection some of the time in a CI context, right?
Yeah, so at some point when I'm not sure what's the progress on that, we will have a base class for CI, then we will need to go in again and update those models to point to inherit from the CI model. And at that step, we also need to validate that we are using the right connection or not. Let's say when you start a transaction, so you don't want to.
One thing I'm wondering about is if like we have this Rubocop rule and then all of the rule violations are fixed and changed to application record dot connection, then we have no rule violations left to fix, but we have code that's wrong because it's using the wrong connection for CI models. So do we need a different rule that says you can't refer to application record dot connection from the context of CI files, or do we instead take a different approach and say you can't ever refer to application record dot connection actually, and really you should only ever be referring to self dot connection in the context of a model, or self dot class dot connection, or whatever we have access to in the model context, and any application record dot connection or active record based connection requires a Rubocop override because like you know that for sure that that's right to do in that context because there will be a few cases left over. That's kind of what I'm wondering about, why the rule doesn't ban the use of both of those things.
Yeah, that's a good point. So normally you should be able. So if you let's say you do simple transactions, then you should be able to just say model.transaction, and that will automatically pick up the right connection. There is this special case when we have a connection where you update a user and the CI build, for example, and that's what you don't want to do. And to be honest, at this point, I don't think we can detect that by statically analyzing our code. That's something we need to do during CI runs, maybe have some sort of extra hack in active record where we keep track of the transactions, and if there is a transaction open on the main database and then you make a query on the CI database, then we raise some sort of error. Not sure.
Yep. Yeah, I think we can do that.
Yeah, but as soon as you start using, sorry?
No, that's separate. We don't do this in this MR.
Yeah. Or if you go back to the schema ideas, so if we assume that the CI will run using schemas, this error will be visible right away. Or not? No, it won't be visible because there is no error.
Yeah, it sounds like you're describing a different problem to what I talked about.
It's
something we should solve later.
So coming back. Yeah, coming back to Dylan's point, I think it'd be nice if we can do that, but I think the issue is that precisely the transaction problem. Like if we have a transaction that's many models, we need application record.transaction or active record based transaction. Can we choose one? Or we can choose that. Okay, that's one way to do it.
Well, my question is, okay, if I'm thinking about that, what's the difference between active record based .transaction and application record .transaction? Like, I don't understand getting rid of one and changing it for another when they're both this kind of global thing that developers are going to see as meaning, oh, it's the global transaction I can request.
It's the same, yeah. So my thinking is that we can split the fixing order offenses into two even as well. So for those where it is the same, we just change the application record. Yes, it is the same. I think functionally, I think it makes no difference. But for those we know that functionally it will make a difference, or we know that it has to be converted to multiple databases, I would propose that we disable the cop using the Rubocop disable comment thing, and then have a link to an issue to say we will fix this to use multiple databases.
Well, thinking about it differently then, because I'm just worried about the possibility that like we just start prematurely replacing too many of them with application record.connection, and we won't have any Rubocop failures left to fix for the CI stuff. And I'm also worried about the case where we should be saying model.transaction, but the developer doesn't know about that, and they just see all these examples of application record.transaction, so they just create an application record.transaction, and then again we resolve the Rubocop rules. If I guess it is common for us to be doing transactions across multiple tables. So in that context, application record.transaction makes sense. But maybe there's like another possibility where you have to like explicitly say the things that you're expecting to transact over, the tables that you're expecting to transact over, or the models in this case, and we can kind of tell you if that's valid. And we can dynamically enforce it in CI and say, like, you're only allowed to deal with these models in this transaction. Or like I was kind of thinking about, like, so instead of application record.transaction, you are forced to write multi-table generic connection.transaction or something like that. So like these I don't know, they might not be rare cases, they might be really frequent, but if there were rare cases, it would just be like more obvious to the developer that they were opting into doing something that is risky, and that in particular, if they start acting on CI tables in this context, then their code is wrong and it needs to be fixed later.
But this Adam's thing is bigger than transaction, is every single class method.
Right.
Yes.
If we, it's the dot connection method, right? It's the primary issue here.
Yeah, connection, transaction. I think these are the two main methods that we are changing.
Transactions pretty much just proxied to connection, right? Like they're the same conceptually. It's like you're asking for a database connection and trying to execute on that.
Well, and it executes commit. Oh no, begin. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it executes something, but it may as well be dot connection dot transaction, and possibly that's how it's actually aliased. I don't know, but I'm just guessing. Like conceptually, it's probably dot connection dot transaction dot do, and so like the root cause is somebody asking for a generic connection. And if we give somebody the easy, okay, the way to ask for a generic connection is just change it all to application record, I feel like we've maybe just shifted the problem somewhere else without actually.
Well, yeah, it's still the same problem. It doesn't do anything. Yeah, I agree.
It is conceptually more sound in that we believe application record is the model representation of the shared class of our shared or main database in GitLab, and it's better than active record base. I kind of get that, but it's not really solved the actual problem we're trying to solve, which is that
Wouldn't things start breaking once we define a different connection explicitly for application record and compared to CI? Oh no, but CI descends on application record.
Oh, does CI descend from application record as well? Well, no, what I was thinking, the dynamic analysis situation is what Adam added before. We need to like detect that if you're executing against a different table while in the context of another transaction, like we're going to need to do that as a kind of runtime error we implement. But
now what I'm saying is that it may actually is a marginal improvement to shift things from active record to application record, because it
Right.
enables more dynamic checking when we run things.
How does it allow us to do better dynamic checking when we run things?
I don't know yet. No, my theory, that's why I don't know. Perhaps maybe Adam knows why we're doing this.
I'm thinking about all of the intercepting active record stuff, and that stuff is implemented in a layer that isn't in application record. It's like you subscribe to SQL active record events, and then you can intercept those requests. And that would probably be where we'd implement some kind of checking.
Yeah, and I also thought that we will probably have more stuff in application record that is related to the main database. So maybe we will use the Rails 6.1, defining replicas, and maybe in the future shards in application record, and we'll have a separate one for CI. I'm not sure.
Another kind of hypothetical design is, we might want to tackle incrementally, but sort of thinking if we were to go down that road, like what we actually maybe would want is some kind of main application record and CI application record, which both descend from application record. And
then we ban application record.
But yeah, this is that would actually just be like hundreds of line changes again, so we want to separate that out. But being explicit about all of the tables you expect to act on in a transaction maybe is not useful. I was thinking it would be nice, people be explicit and we could detect that they were trying to do something wrong. But the thing I think now is not a good idea about that is that the really nice thing about using transactions is you can just say, look, I'm expecting all the code that runs in here to be rolled back, and like someone's going to write some code that persists something to some model, and they can do that safely, knowing that any errors will be rolled back across everything. And I think the dynamic analysis approach of just detecting that you're trying to query the CI database while you've got an open transaction somewhere else is probably the best way for us to just prevent those problems. And maybe, I don't know. And then I'm still kind of confused about why switching to application record helps us much, but I don't know, it sort of seems a little bit more conceptually sound given our modeling, but okay, another question then. If we are we expecting people to use model.connection by default? Is that our recommendation?
Yeah, that would be actually thinking about it. Maybe we could adapt the rule to first suggest to use the model, the transaction, and then if you have multiple different models, you can fall back to application record. You could also have a documentation page about this with some examples. It might be, but I wouldn't raise an offense all the time for this.
Yeah, I think that's fine because application record.transaction or transacting over multiple tables is going to be a common enough pattern that we don't necessarily want to discourage it with RuboCop. And then, encouraging model in our documentation gives us the added benefit that in future, any models we want to move to a separate logical database, they will already be partly encapsulated by the correct connection request. Rather than us having more connections to unwind later on, if we can pre-unwind them now.
Cool. I will make some updates then, and also write a small documentation page about this. If you don't have, I don't think we have about the transaction. The next one is also from me. So I was trying to set up a PG bouncer on my local GBK, and what tried is just what happens to the Rails application when you are adding some loads, so visiting some pages, and you just kill all the connections right away. And what I noticed that actually we don't raise error right away, but we're doing some built-in retry already, which is I was very surprised to see that it's actually working. My only problem is from that we are trying to do this retry stuff within the application. We are going to probably saturate the connections to Puma, because yeah, those connections will just loop there, and incoming connections will probably not getting served. So I wonder if we can do this a bit better, and maybe do this looping outside of Puma, maybe in Workhorse, to just retry the request when we get some sort of database access errors. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just realized you were now talking about a slightly different thing to what I thought you were talking about. But where did we have this? Had like sent some messages back and forth on this the other day. Maybe it was in Slack. It was like relating to the some cloud tool that you link to has this retry mechanism built in where all of your requests are being proxied by some CDN thing, and those requests make it to the application, and the application can respond with a header to the proxy to say, actually, I am the wrong server to handle this write request, because it was to do with some distributed thing where write requests are supposed to be sent to the right node. But it seemed related to our case in that we have a proxy in front of our application that can handle lots of connections and is more lightweight than Rails, and that's Workhorse. And we could respond with a header to that proxy to say, the application is briefly down, and you don't need to serve an error to the user, but you could retry the request in 3-5 seconds, and the user may notice some latency, but not an error. That, I think, was the kind of possible solution to retries that didn't involve database retries during a brief period of downtime. But I think this kind of has its limits on how long the downtime is, because minutes is so long that it doesn't really make sense for users to wait on their requests. But does anybody else have thoughts on this topic?
Also, any idea? So, I mean, I don't know. We are not there yet. I guess we don't really have a benchmarking environment. We have no idea how long will it take to actually finish the sync after we cut the connection. So I'm referring to the migration plan. So how long does it take to finish the data replication to the CI database, and then really enable the connection so the application can continue operate?
I think that we either go and we are sure that we're going with 1-2 minutes max, or we are going above that. So there are two different strategies there. I don't know if so. When we reach that point, we should know that we are going to go with a transition of maximum 1 minute, and have a different plan if we see that we cannot do it in 1 or 2 minutes. I don't know if everyone agrees with that. I don't think that we can cover both, and the solution for the 1 minute and everything we discussed seems it's not reliable and it's not working for many minutes. We will have to do something different there, and accept the fact that maybe the application will be in full maintenance mode for a few minutes.
Yeah, I think that's how I'm thinking about it. And then pretty much the only way we can move forward is just getting a benchmarking environment and actually running the experiment of what it looks like. But yeah, I don't know. In the meantime, like we could, proof of concept and implement this Workhorse retry mechanism, where Workhorse does the retries for us rather than doing it at the database layer or the application Rails layer, for the reasons that Adam said. It reduces the amount of time Puma is holding on to client requests and reduces Puma resources. And retrying the whole request is actually kind of a lot neater from a code perspective than trying to retry a partially failed transaction and trying to figure out where you're at in the query stack to figure out what needs to be retried in the application code. So, or you could do it in rack, but then yeah, that's similar to retrying at the workhorse level, just holds on Puma connections longer.
And also we have seen with some issues we had with load balancer and with after commits and some other types of hooks, that sometimes it's very tricky to handle failed transactions. And sometimes things happen that we don't expect, like a failed transaction and then the load balancer trying again and Rails thinking that the previous part was successful. And there are a lot of tricky edge cases there to solve if you go low level.
Yeah, so I guess it's just easier to accept the fact that it's done, it's not working, and then just erase the error or just continue the error to bubble up and handle it at a higher level.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable for us to experiment with doing this at the workhorse level, but we won't know if we're actually going to ship that until we figure out how long these migration timings will take. Potentially is an interesting experiment for future migrations that we believe we can get down to a few seconds transition cutovers. I mean, that was exactly the same thing we were talking about resharding when we were looking into sharding things. Resharding would result in a few seconds of downtime. So there might be several interesting ways we could use that in the future, but whether we use it here, we need to wait for the benchmarking.
Yes.
We're out of topics. Does anybody know how to stop the recording?
I cannot see the button, to tell you the truth. I don't know the recording, so I only have a button to just record locally. I cannot stop the global recording.
Yeah.
Someone else has done.
Robots are in control.
Oh well. If you want to have a social call, we can always switch to somebody's other Zoom. It's not that hard. Just once we leave, people will not come back.
Yep.
Well, we almost took up the whole time. We had a good chat today anyway, but yeah. Well, yeah, it's 53. So we got
7
much of the way
minutes
through the meeting.
ish. Yeah. But if you want, we can have a social call. But if not, then show of hands.
I'll probably jump off and have dinner now since it smells like it's about ready. But
as Craig says, let's give people 7 minutes back of their time. And I want to say goodbye. I don't know, I will be out for my parental leave, so see you soon.
All right, I'll say good luck.
see you soon.
Yeah.
Good luck.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.